The Deep Space Monitoring Station in Nevada picked up the signal at 3:47 a.m. Earth time. Tom Miller, the night shift operator, nearly spilled his coffee when the instruments started blaring. At first, he thought it was a malfunction. The readings were off the charts. "Control, this is Station 7, he radioed, his voice trembling. "I'm picking up multiple massive objects entering the solar system. This isn't normal space debris." Within hours, every telescope on Earth turned toward the mysterious signals. What they found left the entire scientific community speechless. A fleet of over 300 massive ships, each larger than Earth's biggest cities, had appeared just beyond Mars' orbit. They were unlike anything humans had ever seen or built. Their hulls seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly metallic shine that changed colors in the sunlight. But something was wrong. The ships weren't moving under their own power. They were drifting, rotating slowly in space like dead leaves in a pond. The first detailed scans revealed no active power signatures from their engines. The world's governments scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were called. Military forces went on high alert. But before any decisions could be made, the message came. It wasn't a threatening ultimatum or a declaration of war. It was a plea for help. The message repeated in perfect English, broadcast on all frequencies. "To the inhabitants of Earth, we seek your assistance. Our fleet carries 2.3 million survivors of the Centauri collapse. All primary and backup systems are failing. We have searched for your world based on your transmissions. You may be our last hope." Dr. Kate Anderson, head of NASA's First Contact Division, was the first to establish two-way communication with the fleet. The alien commander's holographic image appeared in the UN emergency session, causing gasps from the assembled leaders. The alien, who called himself the Navigator, explained their situation. Their civilization had been highly advanced, using crystalline-based technology that harnessed the power of stars. But when their sun began to destabilize, they were forced to evacuate their entire system. During the escape, a massive solar flare had damaged their ship's core systems. "Our technology is failing in ways we cannot repair," the Navigator explained, his translated voice carrying a note of desperation. "Our engineers are specialists in crystal matrix systems. We have no experience with mechanical solutions, but we have studied your civilization. You humans still remember how to build things from basic principles. You understand physical mechanics in ways we have forgotten." The UN Council chamber erupted in murmurs. Humanity, considered primitive by most advanced civilization standards, was being asked to save a far more advanced species precisely because of their primitive knowledge. President Williams of the Global Space Coalition stood up. "How long do your people have? Life support systems will begin to fail in 30 Earth days. Complete system failure will occur in 60 days. The chamber fell silent. 60 days to save over 2 million lives using technology humans had never seen before. It seemed impossible. But then something remarkable happened. Dr. Anderson stepped forward, her voice clear and determined. "We've spent our entire history solving impossible problems. It's what humans do best. We'll help." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Space agencies worldwide began mobilizing. Engineers were called in from every nation. Recovery ships were prepped for launch. For the first time in human history, every country on Earth united behind a single goal: saving a stranded alien civilization. As the first human ships approached the massive alien fleet, the true scale of the challenge became clear. Each vessel was a city in space, housing thousands of refugees in suspended animation. Their crystalline technology, while advanced, was completely alien to human understanding. But humans had one advantage. They knew how to fix things with basic tools and materials. The Navigator watched from his command ship as the tiny human vessels approached. "Will they really be able to help us?" his second-in-command asked. "They must," the Navigator replied, watching the determined approach of the human ships. "Out of all the civilizations we detected, they alone still possess the knowledge we need. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most powerful. As the first human engineering teams prepared to dock with the alien vessels, no one knew if this unprecedented rescue mission would succeed. But one thing was certain: humanity was about to prove its worth to the galaxy in a way no one had expected. The greatest engineering challenge in human history had begun. The first team of human engineers stood in awe inside the alien ship's main engine room. The walls pulsed with faint blue light, emanating from crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the floor to the ceiling. Jack Wilson, the lead engineer, ran his handheld scanner across the nearest crystal column. "It's like nothing we've ever seen," he muttered, studying the readings. "These crystals aren't just power conductors. They're living technology. They grow, adapt, and repair themselves. Or at least they used to." The alien engineer beside him, who the humans called Blue due to his shifting azure skin tone, nodded sadly. "The solar flare corrupted their basic growth patterns. We've tried everything in our knowledge to heal them, but nothing works." Around them, other engineers were taking measurements and samples. Mary Roberts, a power systems specialist, was comparing the crystal's energy output to Earth standards. The numbers made her whistle. "Even in their damaged state, one of these crystals produces more power than a nuclear reactor," she announced. "But the power isn't reaching their critical systems anymore. It's like their veins are clogged." Jack walked around the crystal column, his mind racing. 20 years of fixing everything from car engines to space stations had taught him to look for simple solutions to complex problems. "What if," he said slowly, "we'd bypass the crystal network completely?" Blue's large eyes blinked in confusion. "Bypass? But the crystals are the ship. Everything runs through them." "Exactly the problem," Jack replied, pulling out his tablet to sketch a diagram. "You're trying to fix the crystals themselves. But what if we treat them like any other broken power source and just run traditional power lines around them?" The other engineers gathered around as Jack explained his idea. It was almost insultingly simple: use Earth's primitive copper wiring and electronic systems to create a parallel power grid inside the alien ships. The crystals would still produce power, but the energy would flow through human-made conduits instead of the damaged crystal pathways. Blue studied the diagram, his skin shifting to a puzzled green. But our systems aren't designed to interface with metal conductors. The power types are completely different." Mary stepped forward, excitement in her voice. "Actually, we might have a solution for that too." She pulled out a small device from her toolkit. "This is a new type of transformer we developed for the Mars colonies. It can convert almost any energy type into usable power. If we scale it up, we could bridge the gap between crystal and copper." Jack finished. "We'd need to build thousands of them, but it's doable." The next few hours were a flurry of tests and calculations. The human engineers set up a small test circuit, connecting one of the smaller crystals to their equipment through a modified transformer. The alien engineers watched nervously as Jack made the final connections. "Ready?" he asked, hand on the switch. Everyone held their breath. The circuit hummed to life. Blue lights flickered along the copper wire, and the test generator's display showed a steady power flow. It wasn't pretty. The elegant alien technology now connected to clunky human hardware, but it worked. Blue's skin turned a bright yellow with excitement. "Impossible. You've managed to harness crystal energy through metal." Word of the successful test spread quickly through both fleets. The navigator himself came to inspect the prototype, his normally formal demeanor breaking into what the humans assumed was a smile. "Your solution is inelegant," he admitted, studying the maze of wires and transformers. "But its very simplicity is what makes it brilliant. We were too focused on perfect solutions to see the practical ones." But Jack knew they'd only solved the first part of the problem. "We'll need to manufacture millions of feet of specialized cable, thousands of transformers, and find a way to install them throughout your ships without disrupting life support, all in less than 2 months." The navigator placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. You've already done what we thought impossible. Perhaps it's time we learned to trust human ingenuity." As the engineers began planning the massive retrofit operation, Jack couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the biggest problems needed the smallest solutions. Humanity might not have living crystals or star-powered ships, but they knew how to roll up their sleeves and fix things the old-fashioned way. The real work was just beginning. The warning alarms blared through the alien flagship's corridors. Red emergency lights pulsed as crews of humans and aliens rushed toward the critical sector. Life support was failing faster than anyone had predicted. "Status report," shouted Jack as he ran alongside Blue, both carrying heavy equipment packs. "Oxygen recyclers are down to 15% efficiency in sectors 7 through 12. Blue's translator crackled. "Temperature control failing. We have over 10,000 sleeping colonists in those sections." They reached the main junction where Mary was already working, her hands flying over a makeshift control panel. Sweat dripped down her face despite the rapidly cooling air. "The crystal degradation is accelerating," she reported without looking up. "It's like a chain reaction." Around them, the massive chamber that once glowed with healthy blue light now flickered weakly. The living crystal structures were turning this sickly gray, dying from the inside out. They had less than 12 hours before life support failed completely in the affected sectors. "We can't wait for the main retrofit," Jack decided, pulling equipment from his pack. "We need a temporary fix now." The human engineers had been working around the clock for the past week, installing their hybrid power systems throughout the fleet. But they'd only managed to convert 3 of the smaller ships so far. The job was simply too big, too complex to complete in time. Mary connected her tablet to the nearest crystal cluster. "If we can route emergency power from the converted ships." "The power transfer arrays aren't ready," Blue interrupted, his skin dark with worry. "Without proper shielding, the energy feedback cold." A sudden crack echoed through the chamber. One of the major crystal columns split down the middle, releasing a burst of energy that sent everyone diving for cover. When they looked up, the column was completely dead, its light extinguished. Jack stared at the dead crystal, then at his toolkit, and suddenly straightened up. "We're thinking too big," he said. "We don't need to power the whole section. We just need to keep life support running for the sleeper pods." He pulled out a portable fusion generator, standard emergency equipment on human space missions. It was meant to power a small habitat in emergencies, but with modifications. "Blue, how many colonists can one crystal support at minimum power?" The alien engineer's calculations were quick. "About 50, but..." "Perfect." Jack was already rewiring the generator. "Mary, get me every portable power unit we have. We're going to daisy-chain them together and power each crystal individually, just enough to maintain basic life support." It was desperate, possibly crazy, but they had no choice. Within hours, human engineers from every ship in the fleet had brought their emergency generators. They created a web of power cables, connecting each sleeping pod cluster to its own small power source. It wasn't elegant. Cables snaked everywhere. Generators hummed in every corner. But pod by pod, section by section, they stabilized life support. The navigator arrived as they were connecting the last section. He stood silently, watching humans and aliens working side by side, using tools and techniques that would have been considered primitive by his people's standards just weeks ago. "We didn't save the crystals," Jack explained, wiping grime from his face. "But we bought ourselves time. A few weeks at least." "Time enough to complete the main retrofit?" the navigator asked. "It'll be close. But now we know we can't wait for perfect solutions. Sometimes you have to patch things together and make it work." The navigator's translator was silent for a moment. "There is an old saying among my people: perfection is the enemy of survival. We had forgotten this wisdom. You humans, you remind us of who we once were before technology made us forget the value of simple solutions." As the emergency teams began setting up monitoring stations for their makeshift system, Jack watched humans and aliens working together, learning from each other. The aliens were starting to think like human engineers, looking for quick fixes and workarounds instead of perfect solutions, and the humans were beginning to understand the elegant complexity of crystal technology, finding ways to blend old and new. They still had an enormous task ahead, but they'd proven something important. Human ingenuity, combined with alien technology, could accomplish the impossible. They just had to take it one problem at a time. The race against time continued, but now they had a fighting chance. During the brief rest period between work shifts, Jack found himself in what the aliens called the Memory Garden. It was a vast chamber filled with holographic displays showing images of their lost homeworld. The scenes shifted like dreams, crystal cities that reached into purple skies, floating gardens of light, and strange animals that seemed to be made of living glass. Blue stood beside him, his skin reflecting the soft glow of the holograms. "This is all we have left now," he said quietly. "Memories stored in data crystals." "It's beautiful," Jack replied, watching a crystalline bird soar through an alien sunset. "I'm sorry you lost it all." "We knew our sun was dying," Blue explained. "We had centuries to prepare, to build these ships. But we were so confident in our technology that we never considered it could fail us." Their conversation was interrupted by Mary's arrival. She carried several tablets and wore an excited expression. "You both need to see this," she said, laying out the devices. The tablets showed data from their hybrid power systems, but there was something strange in the readings. The human-made power lines were working as intended, but the crystals they were connected to were showing signs of change. "The dead crystals," Mary explained, pointing to the charts. "They're responding to our power feed, not just conducting it, but absorbing it, learning from it." Blue's skin shifted to a bright pattern they'd come to recognize as surprise. Impossible. The crystal matrices were corrupted beyond repair. "Look at these growth patterns," Mary insisted. "The crystals aren't just carrying our power, they're adapting to it, evolving." Jack studied the readings. The living technology of the aliens was doing something unprecedented. It was learning to work with human methods, creating new pathways that could handle both crystal and electrical energy. "Your crystals," he said slowly, "they're not just power sources, are they? They're more like coral reefs, living things that can adapt to their environment." Blue's translator crackled as he tried to explain concepts that had no human equivalent. "The crystals were originally simple life forms that we guided into becoming technology. We shaped them over thousands of years until they became what you see now. But we never imagined they could adapt to such different energy patterns." As they talked, more off-duty engineers, both human and alien, gathered in the Memory Garden. What started as a technical discussion evolved into something more. The aliens shared stories of their world, their culture, their art. The humans talked about Earth, about their different nations and traditions, about their dreams of reaching the stars. An alien engineer named Silver, for their metallic skin tone, brought out a device that created three-dimensional music, crystalline sounds that formed shapes in the air. A human engineer taught them Earth songs, and soon the garden was filled with an impossible mixture of alien and human music. They shared their foods, human emergency rations that the aliens found fascinating and alien nutrient crystals the humans could actually digest. They taught each other games. Chess matched against a crystal-based strategy game that had been played on their world for millennia. The navigator found them there hours later, humans and aliens sitting together among the holograms of a lost world, sharing stories and songs and hopes for the future. "I never expected this," he admitted to Jack. "When we sought Earth's help, we thought only of technical solutions. We didn't realize we would find understanding." Jack watched as Mary tried to teach a group of alien engineers the basics of juggling, while Blue attempted to explain the principles of crystal harmonics to fascinated human scientists. "Maybe that's the real solution," Jack said. "Not just fixing your ships, but learning from each other. Your people have forgotten some things that we still remember, and you know things we've never dreamed of. Together, together, the navigator finished. We are more than the sum of our parts. Like the crystals adapting to your power systems, perhaps our peoples can adapt to each other. As the rest period ended and the engineers prepared to return to their work, there was a new energy in the air. They weren't just fixing ships anymore. They were building bridges between civilizations, creating something new from the best of both worlds. The fate of millions still hung in the balance, but now they faced it not as separate species, but as one crew working toward a common goal. Sometimes the most important repairs weren't to machines at all, but to the spaces between people. The containment fields are collapsing. Blue's voice echoed through the emergency channel. 3 more ships reporting critical failures. The situation room aboard the flagship erupted into chaos. Holographic displays showed red warning indicators spreading across multiple vessels. The temporary power systems they'd installed were failing faster than they could repair them. Jack stood at the central console, watching the disaster unfold. 30 days had passed since they began the rescue operation, and they'd managed to fully convert almost half the fleet. But now the remaining ships were failing all at once. The crystal degradation is accelerating exponentially, Mary reported, her fingers flying over the controls. It's like they're giving up. The navigator's image appeared on the main screen. We're losing containment on the primary drive cores. If they go critical, he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew a crystal drive explosion would take out half the fleet. Jack stared at the emergency readings, his mind racing. Something about the pattern seemed familiar. The way the crystals were failing, the energy signatures. It's like a fever, he muttered, then louder. That's it. The crystals aren't giving up. They're fighting back. He pulled up the data they'd gathered about crystal adaptation. Look at these energy patterns. When we connected our power systems, the crystals started adapting, trying to heal themselves. But the corruption is fighting the healing process. The crystals are overheating because they're at war with themselves. Blue's skin rippled with understanding. Like an immune response gone wrong. Exactly. Jack turned to the navigator. We need to trigger a complete shutdown. Not just power down. We need to make the crystals go dormant. Let them rest, like putting them into a coma to stop the fever. The alien engineers erupted in protest. A complete shutdown had never been attempted. The crystals might never reactivate. Millions of lives in suspended animation would be at risk. But Mary had already run the calculations. If we don't try this, we'll lose everything in 6 hours. At least with a shutdown, we have a chance. The navigator was silent for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. How do we proceed? We'll need to synchronize the shutdown across all ships, Jack explained. First, we disconnect our power systems. Then we use the remaining crystal energy to create a resonance wave that should force them into dormancy. After that, we'll have exactly 20 minutes to restart them using our power feeds as a guide. Like jump-starting a car, but with living crystals. It was risky, insane even, but they were out of options. The next hour was a blur of preparations. Engineering teams coordinated across the fleet, preparing for the synchronized shutdown. Every available power generator was ready for the restart attempt. All ships reporting ready, Blue announced. Jack took a deep breath. Begin shutdown sequence. One by one, the human power systems disconnected. The crystal ships began to dim, their light fading like stars at dawn. When the last connection was severed, Mary activated the resonance wave. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The crystals went dark, completely dark, for the first time in centuries. The massive ships became silent tombs drifting in space. 15 minutes to critical failure of life support systems, someone announced. Jack watched the countdown, feeling the weight of millions of lives on his shoulders. Stand by for restart. Remember, we only get one shot at this. At the 5-minute mark, they began feeding power back into the dormant crystals. At first, nothing happened. The crystals remained dark and lifeless. Come on, Jack whispered, "Wake up." Then, like a spark in the darkness, one crystal began to glow. Then another, and another. The light was different now, clearer, steadier. The fever was breaking. "Crystal activity stabilizing," Mary shouted. "Corruption levels dropping." Across the fleet, the living technology was reawakening. The crystals had used the shutdown to reset themselves, and now they were accepting the human power feed as a guide to rebuild their patterns. The navigator's voice came through, filled with relief. "All ships reporting successful restart. The crystal matrices are. They're healing themselves." In the aftermath, as systems stabilized and emergency teams confirmed the crisis had passed, Jack finally allowed himself to smile. They'd taken an impossible risk, combining human intuition with alien technology in a way neither civilization would have attempted alone. Sometimes, the boldest solutions were the only ones that worked. In the 3 weeks following the Great Shutdown, the fleet transformed into a hive of unprecedented cooperation. Humans and aliens worked side by side, converting ship after ship to the new hybrid power system. But this time, they weren't just installing emergency patches. They were building something entirely new. "Look at this," Mary called out, showing Jack her tablet as they walked through a recently converted engine room. The display showed the power flow through both crystal and human systems. The crystals aren't just accepting our modifications anymore. They're growing around them, integrating them into their structure. The chamber itself was proof of this evolution. Clean lines of copper and steel merged seamlessly with the living crystal matrices. Human-made power conduits were being enveloped by crystal growth, creating a perfect blend of both technologies. Blue, who had become the lead alien coordinator for the retrofit project, touched one of the merged sections. "The crystals are learning from your technology, creating new growth patterns we've never seen before. It's as if they've discovered a new way to evolve." Teams of engineers from both species now worked in perfect synchronization. Humans had learned to read crystal energy patterns, while aliens had mastered the principles of electrical engineering. They spoke a new hybrid language of technical terms, mixing Earth physics with alien crystal science. The navigator called a fleet-wide meeting to discuss their progress. His hologram appeared simultaneously in every ship's command center. "Thanks to human ingenuity and our combined efforts, we have now successfully converted 80% of the fleet," he announced. "More importantly, the crystal matrices have stabilized across all converted ships. We are no longer fighting against time." Jack stood with his team as cheers erupted throughout the fleet, but they all knew their work wasn't finished. "The real challenge," he said once the celebration quieted, "is making sure your people can maintain these systems after you leave. We need to document everything we've learned, create maintenance protocols that combine both our technologies." The next few days were spent creating what they called the hybrid engineering protocol. Human engineers taught alien crews the basics of electrical maintenance, while alien crystal specialists helped develop new ways to communicate with the evolving crystal matrices. They built training simulators using a combination of human virtual reality systems and alien holographic technology. Maintenance crews practiced emergency procedures that would have seemed impossible just months ago, using standard wrenches and power tools alongside crystal resonance devices. "It's strange," Mary said one day as they watched a mixed training session. "We came here to save them, but we've ended up creating something neither of our species could have achieved alone." The training room was a perfect example. Alien apprentices were learning to use simple human multimeters to diagnose crystal energy flows, while human engineers practiced using crystal harmonics to optimize power distribution. Each species was discovering that their primitive or advanced technologies had unique advantages. The navigator joined them, watching the training with evident satisfaction. "When we first detected Earth's transmissions, we thought we were finding a young, inexperienced species who might help us with manual labor. Instead, we found equals who showed us new ways of thinking." Jack nodded. "And we thought we were just coming to perform emergency repairs. Instead, We've learned that sometimes the most advanced solution isn't always the best one. Sometimes you need both the simple and the complex working together. As the final ships were converted, they began preparing detailed documentation for future generations. The manuals combined human technical drawings with alien crystal maps, creating a new standard for hybrid engineering that could benefit both civilizations. Blue, reviewing the finished documents, turned to Jack with an expression they'd learned to read as pride. You know, in our old engineering academies, we were taught that technology only moves forward, always becoming more advanced. But you humans showed us that true progress sometimes means remembering the basics. The fleet was nearly ready. Soon, the alien ships would continue their journey, carrying not just their original technology, but a new fusion of human and alien engineering that made them stronger than ever. As Jack watched the training sessions continue, he realized they'd done more than save a stranded fleet. They'd proven that the greatest achievements come not from one civilization outshining another, but from different species learning to combine their strengths. The age of hybrid technology had begun. The day of departure arrived with a mix of celebration and melancholy. The massive alien fleet, now fully restored and improved, hovered at the edge of Earth's solar system. Their crystal ships gleamed with a new kind of light, a perfect blend of their original glow and the steady pulse of human power systems. In the flagship's main hall, representatives from both species gathered for the farewell ceremony. The navigator stood before the assembled crowd, his form shifting with emotions their translators couldn't quite capture. "When we first entered your solar system," he began, "we were a dying fleet, carrying the last survivors of our civilization. We came seeking basic help from what we thought was a primitive species." He paused, his skin rippling with what humans now recognized as humor. "We were wrong on both counts." Jack, Mary, and Blue stood together among the engineers who had worked tirelessly for the past 2 months. Around them, the hall was filled with humans and aliens who had become more than colleagues. They were friends, partners in an unprecedented collaboration. "As is our custom," the navigator continued, "we offer payment for the help we received." He gestured, and holographic images appeared, showing designs for advanced crystal technology, faster than light drives, and energy systems beyond human understanding. But before he could continue, Jack stepped forward. With respect, he said, "We'd like to propose an alternative." Mary joined him, carrying a data crystal they had specially prepared. "Instead of payment, we propose an alliance, a continuing exchange of knowledge and culture between our peoples." The data crystal contains something unique, the complete records of their hybrid engineering project, but also Earth's history, art, music, and literature. It was matched by a similar crystal from the aliens, containing their own cultural heritage. "Our species are different," Jack explained, "but that's our strength. You showed us that technology can be alive and growing. We showed you that sometimes the old ways still have value. Together, we've created something entirely new." The navigator's skin shifted to deep gold, a sign of highest approval. "An alliance," he agreed, "not of advanced and primitive, but of equals who complement each other." They established protocols for future communication and exchange. Earth would serve as a waypoint for other alien ships, a place where crystal technology and human ingenuity could work together. In return, human engineers would be welcomed aboard alien vessels, learning and contributing to their continued evolution. Blue approached Jack and Mary as the ceremony concluded. "There's something else we want to share," he said, leading them to a viewing window. Outside, in the void of space, a small crystal began to grow from a seed they had prepared. But this crystal was different. It grew in a pattern that incorporated both species' designs, a living monument to their cooperation. "We call it the bridge," Blue explained. "It will stay here, marking this place where two civilizations learned they had something to teach each other." As the alien fleet prepared to depart, Jack looked at the teams of humans and aliens making final checks and exchanging farewells. 2 months ago, they could barely communicate. Now they moved in perfect synchronization, each understanding the other's strengths and methods. The navigator made one final announcement. We came here seeking salvation and found something far more valuable. A reminder that true advancement comes not from believing we have all the answers, but from being willing to learn new ones. The departure was a spectacular sight. The crystal ships, their hybrid systems pulsing with new life, lit up the space around them like a constellation of man-made stars. The bridge crystal glowed between them, a permanent reminder of what they had achieved together. As the fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel, Jack stood with Mary in the Earth observation post. "You know," he said, "they're going to tell this story across the galaxy, how a primitive species saved an advanced civilization." Mary smiled, watching the bridge crystal's steady glow. "Maybe that's the real lesson here. There's no such thing as primitive or advanced. There's just different ways of solving problems." The bridge crystal pulsed in agreement, a living symbol of two species who had learned that the greatest strength lies not in technology alone, but in the willingness to learn from each other. In the years that followed, many other alien ships would visit Earth, seeking to learn the unique blend of crystal and human engineering that had been born here. And every time, the story would be told of how humanity's greatest achievement wasn't in advancing technology, but in remembering the value of simple wisdom.